Welcome, audience members. You are now entering the Parliament of the Daleks, a Doctor Who podcast focusing on the toys, action figures, and merchandise from the past, present, and future of our favorite sci-fi franchise. I'm your Dalek fanatic host Wade, joined by figure expert Alex and Jack, and this is our first legitimate episode for the series. We'll be taking a look at Character Options 5.5-inch action figures from 2005 and 2006 on this episode, Disco Dancers and Daleks. This is the beginning for the purpose of our podcast, and we will be traveling back in time to 2005, the year Doctor Who as a series was revived, but also when Character Options kickstarted the toy line. Joining us, we have our good friend, Jack.
Hello there.
Nice to see you, Jack. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, too. Alex, you're the one next up. You're our figure expert. How are you doing?
I'm alright, how are you?
Doing pretty good. It's nice of you guys to join me, and what can I say? This is the first legitimate episode of our series. How exciting is that? We finally get to have a glorious purpose in what we want to do.
Yeah, it's great to start this wonderful journey of actually looking through the entire chronology of the Doctor Who figure line. I think there's something that's not done by many people, so it's really fun to actually do it.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and you might be wondering what's happened lately, because we have been gone for a few months, but just basically life has gotten busy. We're all either doing college work or we have jobs or anything like that, so it was a little hard to schedule something. And we're not sure if Ryan will be able to do the podcast with us. He has been busy as well, but we're just going to continue on ahead. We're going to produce as much content as we can. So, now it is time to officially start our journey in exploring the history of Doctor Who action figures and toys. We felt it would have been right to begin the series with Character Options, the official licensed toy company to sell Doctor Who toys ever since the revival of the show in 2005. This is the brand that we grew up with as kids, and their products are near and dear to our hearts. Alex, you are our figure expert. How did this toy line start out?
Well, Wade, before I begin, I must say there isn't a huge amount of information out there about the early days of the range, mostly because the internet wasn't what it is now back in 2005, plus of course general confidentiality on how these figures are made. So I'll cover some of the rumours surrounding these figure releases, but please do not take them as fact. Various toy companies in 2005 were pitching their ideas for Doctor Who toys to the BBC, with Hasbro being rumoured to be one of them, but the higher-ups of the company didn't see any value in the franchise for international markets, so ultimately turned it down. However, as we know, Character Options were the ones to get it. Al Duar mentions on the DoctorWhoToys.net forum that he mentioned to the BBC worldwide representative that he had a police box at the bottom of his garden at the time, and he thinks that that might have tipped the balance for them securing the license. When given the license, Character Options didn't initially intend on starting a full range of action figures. They planned to just make remote-controlled Daleks in two sizes, 12-inch and 5-inch. These sizes were somewhat random, but this is ultimately how the 5.5-inch scale for the figure range came about, since the Daleks were made to be 5 inches precisely, with an average person being slightly taller than a Dalek. It meant that the humanoid figures would be 5.5 inches in height. So that explains the somewhat unusual scale of the Doctor Who range. During the creation of these Daleks, design works also had very few reference images given to them by the BBC to create the sculpt. This meant the final products had very inaccurate proportions. This disproportionate Dalek look would be featured on all the figures until 2008. The Ninth Doctor and Rose figures were a relatively late addition to the Dalek Battle Pack, being included simply just as some extra value to the set. They were originally meant to be a static PVC figurine with no articulation, but this was changed last minute. This explains why they're in such set poses that have now been referred to as disco dancing by the fans. The set was released in September 2005, just in time for them to be out during the Christmas period, retailing for £29.99. The Dalek Battle Pack includes 2 remote-control Daleks and their respective remotes, a standard bronze Dalek, and a Dalek that features a unique black and gold design. Both feature several Dalek phrases and light effects. They can fight each other using infrared signals, and after a Dalek has been hit by the other 5 times, it will make a death sound effect and turn off. There are 2 variants of the set released in 2005, one set featuring the Ninth Doctor figure in his burgundy jumper, and the other a Rose figure with bleach blonde hair.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Alex. Now, covering the 2005 figures, Alex, did you have any of these Dalek battle packs?
Yes, I do, but in a way I also don't, in that I bought them under sort of different circumstances, as I didn't actually buy them in the actual pack. I got the Ninth Doctor secondhand for relatively cheap, and also same goes for the Daleks, but I got them separately from different sellers. And I don't have the bleach blonde Rose, as well as we all know, it's not a brilliant figure, and I've just never gotten around to buying it. And in fact, the remote control Daleks I got cost me 50 pence at a school fair that was on at my primary school. And my mum sort of kept them back so no other kids would buy them. So that was quite cool.
That's a wicked deal.
And the fact they both worked as well, which I wasn't expecting when I got it, because I don't think they'd been tested by anyone at the school. So it was like, these might work, these might not, but the 50 pence. So I took the chance, and yeah, both worked, which was pretty surprising, except one of the bronze Daleks had its dome light missing, which was a bit annoying. But I got a second one, so that was sort of sorted out.
That's really cool. Jack, did you have any of these figures from back in the day?
No, I really only started getting into collecting or playing with the figures when I was about 7 years old, 8-ish. So that was around Series 3. So Doctor Who was basically off my radar until Martha came along.
Did you get these figures later in life by any chance, or not really?
I think I came across a bundle on eBay. I was looking for custom parts, and it included. I doubt the electronics worked, but I didn't bother because it didn't come with a remote. But the black and gold Dalek, and I think all that remains of it now is the skirt. It's sitting in a custom, fodder box. But for the little time I had it, it looked like a fun toy. I'm sure I would have enjoyed it as a child.
Yeah, as figures, these are really unique ones, especially that black and gold Dalek. I never had either of these sets as a kid, and I still don't have them now. They pop up occasionally in America, but they're often kind of pricey. They're around $50 or more if they're in the box. But just looking at them, I don't really care for the Ninth Doctor or the Rose, although I do prefer the Ninth Doctor, even though he's in his disco pose. But that black and gold Dalek, he is really, really cool looking, and is such a unique Dalek for character options to pick. Because now, oftentimes, many people say, oh, he was never in The Parting of Ways or Bad Wolf, but he technically is. You can see him in the far background towards the right side, and you'll see him fly by, moving from right to left. And he's totally there. He looks like a squad leader or something like that. It's just a blink and you'll miss him sort of Dalek. But just the fact that character options either saw him or maybe they got concept pictures of him, we're not entirely sure. But just the fact that they made him is just really, really cool to go along with that bronze Dalek.
Yeah, it is a sort of odd figure, really. Like, it is a blink and you'll miss it Dalek.
It is an odd choice, given that there's so many other prominent variants in that episode.
That's true.
But I think they thought it looked good as a toy. Make it as a toy.
Yeah, I feel like it was really done as like a variation for the battle pack to, really distinguish the two Daleks, mostly. It's definitely based off Parting of the Ways Dalek, in that there was also the Imperial Buzzsaw Dalek that was seen in that episode, which had the bronze midsection but had the black skirt and dome. Yeah, there's quite a few possibilities.
A part of me wonders if CO was thinking ahead and thinking, well, there's a chance to sell, multiple of these packs to the same person, because if you have them in sort of an inverse of each other's colours, you could have a sort of Dalek Civil War as a kid. I was thinking, I wonder if that's it. If you make them look so different, in their colour schemes, kids might be able to pretend, Daleks are fighting each other because they're not on the same team.
Yeah, that's very true, because ultimately these Daleks are meant to fight each other in the pack, so it makes sense that there'd be different factions, very much like Remembrance of the Daleks, say, but creating a sort of new colour scheme for the black one.
What's unique about this black one is this is the only time in these Dalek RC battle packs that he was released. He was never made as a single carded figure, wasn't offered in a multi-pack or anything. These RC Dalek battle packs were about the only way you could get him. That doesn't mean he's rare. He was released about 4 times in its lifespan, but he's still really cool nonetheless. Did you guys have any friends who maybe had this set and you played with the remote controls with these by any chance?
I didn't. None of my friends at school liked Doctor Who, and by the time I found friends that did, that set was way gone.
Yeah, I didn't, like, for a start, I just generally didn't have many friends. And those who I did, I mean, it was weird because I think I got into Doctor Who a bit later than the rest of my friends did. They sort of got into it with Tennant, and then once Tennant left, they all sort of turned away from it. But with me, I got into Doctor Who in 2009, which was Tennant's final year. So I was on that Tennant bandwagon for a little bit, but then, you know, when Matt Smith came along, for me, that brought a whole new lease of life into the show for me, and I didn't give up. But basically everyone else did, so I was sort of a bit, you know, alone in that aspect.
I can relate on some level to that. Another thing about these 2005 packs is oftentimes I heard that the remote controlled feature worked terribly. People said it broke down like after 5 minutes or so, and that the motors were weak. You did it over carpet, the wheels would get jammed, anything like that. So my gut is this is probably why they were released 2 times more after that, maybe to correct some of the first wave issues. They're still great toys nonetheless, even if they are broken, if you ask me, because they are nice looking Daleks and a nice little feature to have in your collection.
There's something very retro about them. They really remind me of the Dapol Daleks.
I agree.
But yeah, I think that they probably were a bit broken in those first releases. Even though mine work perfectly fine and still do, I think those first ones would have had issues because I think Character Options really wanted to get that set out before Christmas, and I think that might have pushed on their schedule and meant the quality control wasn't as high with the product.
I think that's true. And just looking at that Ninth Doctor figure, do any of you guys have this one in his disco dancing pose?
Yes, I do have him, and I actually think he's actually a very underrated figure. I actually think the sculpt is really good. Where it's let down is in the paint apps, because his jumper and his flesh tone are quite glossy, so it's very off-putting in that way. But honestly, I think the disco pose isn't like bad for this particular figure. It depends. You've got to sort of pose it in the way it's meant to be posed, if that makes sense. If you sort of do it in any other way, it looks really weird. I think in terms of the sculpt, the only weaknesses are maybe the hands. His hands are quite sort of overly wrinkled, I think.
Huge.
And they're big. And the sonic screwdriver accessory it's a bit of an odd sculpt. Like the tip is sort of a bit too sort of squared off. I think it's pretty underrated really by the collector fan base, really. Because if it had some good paint apps, I think it'd be very much saved.
Jack, did you have this figure?
I didn't. I've never owned this one. I do think the only, things I owned from that set were ever the Daleks, and that was very, later in life.
What about the Rose? Did you have that hideous figure by any chance?
I feel like I've been in the same room as it at one point, but I don't think I ever owned it. I think it might have been at like a Comic-Con, like in the loose figure bins. I think I might have come across it, and I doubt anyone bought it because I definitely didn't.
Yeah, I've come across it like that before as well. But yeah, I don't own one. I've only got the revised version with the actual wash in the hair and overall better detail.
Yeah, that one is better, but oh man, that sculpt, that one is just, that just kills me. Just to look at it, it's so weird. Her arms, her giant pants that she has for her jeans,
Glow in the dark hair.
everything. They look like bell bottoms, man. Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, really. I mean, I can't defend the sculpt on that one. It's really not that great. For me, the worst part is the fact they never gave like the jeans like any sort of like paint washes or anything to make it look like denim. It's just flat out semi-matte blue.
So that's pretty much the only 4 figures that they made. Is it pretty safe to say that the black and gold Dalek, that is the best figure for this year?
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, if you were back in 2005 and your mom said you could only buy one of these, I don't even know why it needs to be a question, but which one are you buying?
Oh, definitely Rose. I'm saying, what's not to love about a glow in the dark Billy Piper? But yeah, seriously, obviously it would be the Ninth Doctor pack. I think every kid wants the Doctor over his companion.
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely pick the Ninth Doctor pack. One thing I just thought is, if you're a collector back then, you'd have had to have bought both packs to actually get the Ninth Doctor and Rose.
So you'd spend £60 basically to get 6 figures. I mean, that does put it in perspective. Even though the Daleks were remote controlled, you're basically paying like £10 per figure.
Yeah, it's very good value.
Not bad.
That's pretty good. All right, 2005 may have only had 4 figures released that year, but this was the beginning of a new age for Doctor Who collecting. Enter the year 2006, and we are now diving into Season 2, and this is the start for the David Tennant era of collecting. This year is an exciting one, because this is when Character Options really started to pump out these figures. Alex, What info do you have on 2006 for us?
So 2006 was the first full figure wave of action figures that we got, and this was before we got that sort of Series 1, Series 2 branding. So they all have, on the single carded packs, no series indications. It's just a blue TARDIS sort of backdrop on there. The first wave was released in February 2006, featured the 10th Doctor in brown suit and coat with sonic screwdriver accessory, the 10th Doctor in brown suit, Rose and Rusty K9, Slitheen, Cassandra with 3 robot spiders, and the Moxa Balhoun with 2 robot spiders, Sycorax leader, and finally the Doctor Regeneration set, which featured the 9th Doctor in his black jumper and the 10th Doctor post-regeneration with sonic screwdriver.
Overall, this is a pretty solid wave. Jack, did you have this 10th Doctor in the brown suit and the brown coat?
Yeah, I think he was my first ever Doctor Who toy. I remember there's a story I can get into later, which I won't spoil. But I remember my aunt, of all people, taking me to the Who shop in East London and saying I can pick anything I want in there. And I instantly went straight over to the 10th Doctor and I thought, I need this one. So got him.
That's pretty cool. Alex, what about you?
Yes, I did, but I did not buy it in this original form. I bought it later on in a re-release, which we'll obviously talk about later on in the series. And yeah, it's actually quite a nice figure. Obviously, as we all know, as figure collectors talk about how primitive the articulation is on these early 10th Doctor figures. But for the time, I honestly think it was a really nice figure. They did a splendid job with the sculpting detail. So yeah, that's all I've really got to say about that one.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty neat figure. I don't have him in this version. I do have the 11 Doctors one and the 13 Doctors one and another one from the Daleks in Manhattan collector set. But one of these days I will get this particular figure, maybe the original version perhaps. But overall, just looking at it, they did a fabulous job, like you said, for the sculpt. The fact that he has a sonic screwdriver and that head sculpt, they nailed it, I think. That really does look like David Tennant.
Absolutely. It's, for me, in my personal opinion, it's still the best head sculpt that character options were produced for the 10th Doctor to date. Like, I know some people prefer the spiky hair versions and stuff we got later on, but I think that's more just because of the hair. But hair aside, which for this time when it was released, this figure in 2006, the hair was correct because for the earlier half of Series 2, his hair is swept over. So honestly, for the time, I think they absolutely got it perfect. And the facial likeness is exactly how it should be. And ever since then, they've not seemed to have quite captured it ever again.
Yeah, that I can agree with. And I really do prefer the combed hair version over the spiky one. Jack, did you have the next version of this with him in the brown suit?
Is that without the jacket?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever did. Not this initial release. I think I got it, years later. But for a long, long time, my only Doctor was the 10th Doctor in his jacket, his long coat.
I think that's more his definitive look in season 2, but it is nice that they did make a version out there of him just in the regular brown suit. Alex, did you have this version?
Yes, but once again, it was not that original release. I got it in the Stolen Earth set, which obviously is several episodes away in 2008. And yeah, I think this one isn't quite as good as the trench coat version in my opinion, just because I think the jacket sculpt's a little puffy. It doesn't really get the skinniness of Tennant's suit across quite right. But as I've said before, I think for the time it was perfectly fine, but I do wish that Character Options would make a revised version of this at some point in the future. Also, for this first release, I don't know why, but it doesn't have a sonic screwdriver, which I think is pretty unfortunate. Seeing as a kid, you might want the suited 10th Doctor, and you then don't get the sonic screwdriver. And for a first release, it's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, that really does bug me. I feel like almost every single Doctor Who figure for the Doctor at least should have a sonic screwdriver with them. What did it cost Character Options? Like 1/10 of a cent to make or something, 1/100th of a cent to produce. They should have just included it. But looking at the next figure for Rose and K9, this is an interesting one. Jack, did you have this 2-pack back in the day?
I did, but it wasn't at the time they came out. I remember these were on shelves, long, long after. And I remember my nan taking me to Asda's, and I got to pick, a figure, and I picked up another one which I'll get into later. But I remember going back another time and picking up Rose and K9. I had no idea who K9 was at the time because I'd only seen Series 3-ish. But once I saw it, I thought robot dog, awesome. I sort of was aware of who Rose was, so I picked that up. And I remember K9 was, he went everywhere. He went with Superman, Batman, Ben 10. He was, in all of my adventures as a kid.
That's really cool. And did you play with that pop-off panel feature much, or the roll back and go?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think eventually that got lost though, because it went everywhere with me. Went to the beach, to the park.
Yeah, he is really cool. Alex, did you have this figure as a kid?
Yeah. I've still got them, obviously. And yet again, like with quite a few of these early releases, I got both the Rose and K9 secondhand separately. So I can't be sure if the ones I own are the exact release or not. I have no clue. They could be, they might not be. Who knows? But I've got to say, I adore the K9 figure. I honestly think it's brilliant. As Jack has mentioned, the pop-off panel is just a work of genius, really, from character options, because it's not a feature that needed to be included, but honestly just gives it so much more life. And I think all the detail, the circuitry underneath and everything is just so well done. And even the rust effects on that first release as well, I think is a really nice addition. And weirdly, I think with that set, Rose is sort of the bonus in that set, really, because she's sort of the weaker point, because obviously of the weird disco dancing sculpt. But this one obviously has much better paint apps. I think the washing the hair really helps. It just, oof, like, thank God it's not like a horrible bright yellow like again. It's so much better, and even the face is painted better. And so yeah, Catchall was just about saved that figure from being known as like one of the worst.
Yeah, and as you said, Rose really is the bonus of this set. I don't have this 2-pack. I really should get it because I do love that little K9. I think I have the clean version in my collection. But honestly, that little K9 back in the day looked like one fun figure.
I mean, it even has the pull back and go motion as well, which is brilliant.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
Like it just whizzes along, it goes so fast. It's ridiculous.
He does.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty neat 2-pack, and like you said before, you're paying the money to get that K9. Now, looking at this next one, this is our first alien that we got in the figure line. This one is the Slitheen. Jack, what are your thoughts on this figure?
Aliens, I remember owning from the show. I remember it. I didn't own it at the time. I owned it at around, 2007-ish. I remember coming home from school and my mum having, like as a surprise for me, I had the TARDIS playset. Ironically, the 10th Doctor in just his, suit without the jacket, and I think I had a Slitheen, I had a Slitheen, and I can't remember. I had something else, but I remember being, like over the moon. I remember thinking, because at the time, one of the Slovenes were one of my favorite aliens, because I was a very simple child. An alien that's green and farts, was bound to be my favorite. But yeah, I remember playing with it. And yet again, it was with my Ben 10 stuff. Batman fought him. Superman was fighting him, because to me he was just a big green alien monster that could fit in pretty much any of my figures I had.
I'd love to see Batman fight the Slitheen. That sounds like right fun.
Yeah.
We start a petition for it.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool looking alien, actually, and I do appreciate the Slitheen as aliens in the show, and even though they do fart, they are pretty cool looking. It was a great costume and a great design that they did for it. Alex, did you have this figure?
Yes, I did. It was actually the first thing I ever got my dad to buy for me off eBay. It's my first eBay purchase of a figure. So as a kid, that was quite exciting because obviously I got into the collecting game kind of late as a kid with the Tennant era stuff and the Eccleston era stuff. Because it's 2009, so I think all the Slitheen figures from like the stores had basically gone. You couldn't find it anywhere. But I really wanted one because I was just like, the Slitheen are so cool. Like as a kid, you just think it's brilliant because it's a huge green alien and it farts and just the sheer size of it as well, and it's quite iconic really for the Eccleston era. And so I just really wanted one, and I couldn't find one in the shops. Basically, asked for my dad to get it off eBay, and yeah, got it. And brilliant figure. I think again the sculpting work is honestly so impeccable, and the paint work as well. It really, the actual wash of the sort of grey on top of the green sort of really highlights it. It's brilliant. The only thing I sort of wish they might have done later on down the line was do like a more neutral face, because the sort of aggressive, screaming sort of face it's a nice sculpt, but it wasn't seen as often as that sort of neutral face that is even present on the packaging. And seeing as they did alternative sort of head sculpts like the Krillitane and things later on, I feel like the Slovene could have had that treatment.
And a quick side note, we do know Character Options had the digital files for that because of certain walkie-talkies they made, but we'll talk about that in another episode. But yeah, this Slovene looks like a great figure. I'd love to get one soon. I really do think it's a nice figure looking at this wave, and just like you said, the sculpt work that they did for it. Did any of you guys try to have the Slovene pick up the figure or choke them or
Yes.
hang them against the wall?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
because he's got huge hands with those long fingernails. It's like
Yeah,
it's just asking to be like picking up other characters, and
it is one of the greatest, figures CO has ever made, in my opinion.
Did it balance pretty well holding a figure up in midair?
Yeah, he had quite
well,
big
I've not
feet.
tried it since I was a child, so I can't comment on that really.
You know what? I do remember though, the knees started to give way quite easily.
Yeah, the knees give way on mine. It's
Yeah,
quite unfortunate because you thought of wanting him to stand up straight because it makes him taller, but I usually have to have mine sort of half hunched over because his knees sort of stay bent, and yeah, it's kind of a shame in that way.
it's because he's got this big fat belly.
It's very top heavy because of the fat belly and the huge arms.
And I was going to mention too, it would have been if you ask me, this would have been a hilarious toy gimmick if you guys are going to laugh, but if Character Options, you squeeze the belly and it like let out a fart noise or
Oh, I
something.
would love that. As a kid, I would have loved
There was
that.
a Shrek toy that had that feature, and I'm like, they should have done this with the Slovene. Like,
That's awesome.
Yeah, as a kid, we all would have loved that. That would have been great.
that would have been the cherry on top for this Slovene figure. But next up, we get another, well, I guess you can say not alien, but it is a human. We have Cassandra with her 3 robot spiders. Jack, did you have this figure?
Yeah, again, not until later in my childhood, but I did. I remember Cassandra was sort of I didn't really know who she was at the time when I owned her, but the spiders, didn't know what they were, loved them yet again. Batman fought them, they attacked Ben 10, everything. I loved them. I think I was just had a sort of, I was partial to a robot as a child, I think.
The spiders are pretty cool looking. Did their head turn by any chance, or was it just a solid?
No, it's just a static, like,
Plastic PVC thing.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
They were slightly bendy.
yeah, they're kind of rubbery, so the legs can sort of move a little bit. You sort of bend them.
I used to wrap them, I remember this, onto my figures. So like you sort of lock onto the body and I pretend they were being mind controlled like Brainiac and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, same. The amount of imaginative play you could do with certain Doctor Who monsters is quite interesting, and
They honestly are pretty cool looking designs, and I thought they were pretty neat. But the Cassandra figure, she doesn't really do much, does she? She just looks like a vertical trampoline. I actually don't mind the character.
I mean, let's face it, that's probably why the robot spiders were included in the pack, because it's on its own it would be a bit underwhelming.
Well, especially for me as a child, I was absolutely petrified. I don't know why, it was a complete irrational fear of brains. I couldn't watch anything, that involved brains. So to have a figure with it sitting in a pot underneath it wasn't, the best toy for me.
It is a pretty cool detail, I can't lie. It is nice that they included that.
Yeah, as a kid, I really loved that detail of the brain inside the sort of blue transparent sort of jar piece. It's just a really nice looking piece, really.
All right, next up, we have another alien in the line. We have the Mox of Balhoun with 2 robot spiders. Alex, did you have this figure?
Yeah, I got this version, but it was in the Series 1 branded box. It wasn't this exact release. And yeah, it's a bit weird really when you look at that wave, why the Mox of Balhoun was chosen as a character to make. Like, it's pretty random, really. But at the same time, from a kid's perspective, you can see the appeal because it's like a fat blue alien in a chair that can, as the pull back and go thing the K9 does, and it just whizzes around. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And I think the detail's done very well as well.
Yeah, he looks like a pretty neat alien. Jack, did you have him back in the day?
I had a version of him. I'm not sure which one. I don't really remember, but I do. I remember not being very impressed by it as a kid. I was like, doesn't you can't really move him. You can't take him out of the chair. So he would always just sit there. in my adventures.
Yeah, that is one thing. I do wish that character options maybe made him removable from his chair. I feel like that would have added a bit more play features for children.
Is it a fair statement to say that he is the first peg warmer in the line?
Probably.
Yeah, pretty much. He's the only sort of side character that's been made in that wave, really.
But yeah, looking at the Mox Balhoun, this is one I will get one of these days. But
And
yeah,
I think he got so many re-releases as well.
yeah, that's the problem right there. There are a ton of him out there, and he really was a peg warmer back in the day, and you can still get him pretty cheap nowadays. Why character options made him so many times, I'm not sure.
Must have been a big seller.
I don't know. If you ask any retailer, they'll tell you, oh my gosh, those hideous blue things, they wouldn't get off the shelves. But yeah, looking at him, he's a pretty decent looking figure. Like you guys said, I wish he was removable, or maybe you could move the head or arms, anything like that. But there's not really much to say about him other than he was in that episode, he was there, got burned to a crisp.
Yeah, again, he's got the robot spiders included with him for a reason. That's all I'll say.
Next figure, we got a really cool alien coming up. We have the Sycorax leader. Jack, do you have this figure?
I didn't own him as a child. I only got him recently, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and I hate to say it, but I think his head might be sitting in a fodder box right now. But I had him for a little while. He was very small, I will say that. But then I think Dog Tooth toys have got progressively bigger over time anyway. But I remember thinking about it, as an adult instead of a child. I do remember being really, really impressed by the sculpt. I thought for an early 2006 figure, it's held its impressiveness, I'll say.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool that he has both his staff and his whip included with him. So it was nice to get two different weapons. Alex, did you have this figure?
Yeah, and I think it actually might have been this release this time for once. Like the actual first one in the non-series branded packaging. I forget where I got it. It's like a Comic Con or something when I was really young. So yeah, I had it as a kid, and as Jack said, the sculpt is very impressive, and even as a kid, I really liked it, especially on the arms, that really heavy sort of red and black sort of contrasting look on there, and the hands with that sort of skeletal sort of look to those, and the face is also very impressive. But according to Edmund Barnett Ward, I think it is on DocTwoToys.net when he did an interview, he said that the sculpt for the back of the head is completely incorrect because of a lack of reference material, which, to be honest, I can completely believe. But to be fair to character options, I think they did a good job of just
Blending it in.
blending it in, working with it, and just making it work. Because as a kid, honestly, it wouldn't have occurred to me at all. It wasn't until I literally read that interview, I was like, oh, it's wrong. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think they did very well with it. And one other thing I really love about it is the staff accessory. It's so well detailed. It's just got so many different little pieces and extra little bits and bobs and all the little painted details on it as well. Like, it's ahead of its time, that accessory, I think. It's very heavily detailed. And it obviously has the whip as well, which I actually don't display mine with the whip because it makes the figure very top heavy to have holding both accessories. But it's obviously very good to have that included because you can sort of have him, electrocuting your other characters with the whip and everything, which, yeah, so it's quite a cool character, I think.
I think this is a cool character. I loved the Sycorax in their episode. I really do wish we could have seen more of them, especially just the way the leader looked. This is a great figure, honestly. Great creepy looking alien. He looks like an ancient warrior. It is a really unique figure. Love the colors and everything on him. While I don't have him as a figure, I do have a Sycorax warrior figure, and I have to say I adore that figure. Really great sculpt. Everything about it just works really well. What can I say? It's just a great looking alien, great looking warrior, great everything. This is one of the better figures that Character Options had made for the range. Next up is a pretty exciting set. We have the Doctor Regeneration set. Jack, do you have this set?
I actually owned these. I don't own them as an adult, so I'll have to sit this question out.
What's your thoughts on them, at least?
I think they're fun. Fun concept, but obviously I have no sort of personal link to them, so I'm not really fit to give an answer to this one.
It's okay. Alex, what about you?
So it's £9.99, which, to be honest, given that that was the standard price for figures later on in the range in like 2009 and 10, it's still brilliant value, really. Only a few pounds more. But yeah, I think the Ninth Doctor, I don't own it. I don't know the 10th Doctor either, at least that specific version. They do look like nice figures, and I think especially in that packaging as like a set, I think the look of it is very nice. Like, if I bought one in the box, I'd probably just keep it in the box. I wouldn't open it, because I think the set is nice, but individually as characters, it's not particularly special. Like the Ninth Doctor is just the same, but with a slightly tweaked head sculpt and a black jumper. Although I think the paint apps are better because the flesh tone's nice and matte and everything like that, and the sonic screwdriver looks a bit better. The 10th Doctor really is the highlight, especially at the time when it's released, because I mean, if you're a customizer, you'd definitely get one to swap the head of the Ninth Doctor, wouldn't you, to have a static pose Ninth Doctor. And I think the Tennant head sculpt again is actually really nice on that one. Probably my second favorite head sculpt that Character Options have done. Not as good in the paint apps, I don't think. Like the hair's a bit lighter and the skin is a little bit anemic, but I think overall very nice. And obviously this one, the difference between this one and later releases is it doesn't have the bicep articulation. But honestly, for the time, it didn't really matter because I don't think any characters until like 2007 had any bicep articulation anyway. So yeah, overall nice set.
I actually have thought of something about this set. In retrospect, I think this might be, and this is just my opinion, the first set that was, really made for collectors. Because personally, this is just me. As a kid, I don't think I would have been too interested in a Doctor wearing the old version of his character's clothes. There's not really much I can do with that as a child. Whereas an adult, it looks great on the shelf, but as a kid, what is there really to do about the wrong Doctor in the wrong clothes? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with that actually. I think because it is interesting because now as a adult collector, I definitely out of the entire wave, I'd draw to that Regeneration set because it's got that collector's value. But I think as a child, unless if you didn't have the Ninth Doctor from the Remote Control Dalek Battle Pack, then to get the Ninth Doctor, then there wouldn't really be any appeal really to get it.
Just real quick, Alex, what was the original retail price for these figures back in 2006?
For the single pack figures, it was £6.99, and for the Regeneration set, as I said before, it's £9.99.
Yeah, honestly, I like this Regeneration set. I think it's a great 2-pack and a great idea. Both figures are pretty nice, and as you said before, the head sculpt on the Tenet looks really nice. My only question is, I wonder why they just didn't do a swappable head feature. I wonder if they were just trying to bump up the cost a little bit using the same, because it's the same body mold, right? Just 2 different heads and arms.
Well, they're both completely different sculpts. Like the
Oh, they are?
regenerated 10th Doctor is completely different.
Okay, I can't quite tell in the photo that I'm looking at, but yeah, it is interesting that they did 2 figures as one, or at least, I don't know. I question why they didn't do them separately or didn't do a swappable head feature, but either way, I think this is a great 2-pack, great idea for a set, actually, for the regeneration scene. So oddly specific.
I really do think it was them marketing it towards collectors versus kids.
I think you could be onto something with that, and especially since they did the black jumper for Eccleston, that's a nice variant to get. That's practically the first Eccleston variant to buy.
Well, it's the first variant in general, really, when you think about it, with the exception of maybe like the revised Rose hair or whatever. But in terms of like a costume variant, it's the first one.
All right, that'll conclude Wave 1 for the Doctor Who figures. What do we have coming up for Wave 2, Alex?
Okay, so for Wave 2, we have a re-release of the 10th Doctor in brown suit and coat, the 10th Doctor in suit, Rose and K9, Savine. But then we go on to the new characters, which were released for the first time, in which we have Chip and Cassandra in a twin pack, and Cyberman and the Cyber Controller.
So, looking at the first new figure in this wave assortment, we have Cassandra and Chip. Jack, you might have said that you had Cassandra. Do you have Chip?
I've never actually owned Chip. I remember thinking, at Comic-Con once, it was like maybe 75p, and I thought, is this really worth my money? Because I was looking at it, and it reminded me more of like a pepper pot or something. It was very static. It was like a big cone, so I passed on it.
Yeah, he's kind of a weird looking figure, especially since he doesn't have any arm articulation, it seems like. It's kind of an odd one. Alex, do you have Chip?
Yes, I do, but I bought him in a set with the destroyed Cassandra, the infamous character.
What do you mean, the best figure ever made?
Oh yeah. So yeah, yeah, it's a very static figure. There's barely any articulation. There's just the shoulders basically and bit of leg articulation. And his neck does move, but it's like very difficult to turn. And it's like the joint's like way beneath his actual neck. It's like on the top of his chest almost sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think the head sculpt's okay, but overall, I'm not that impressed with it really. It's quite I wouldn't say a rubbish figure, but it's sort of a very filler figure, if that makes sense. Like
He's more of an accessory himself than an actual figure.
maybe they sort of made him in a cheaper way because they packed him with Cassandra. So it's sort of to keep the value the same as the rest of the characters sort of thing.
Yeah.
That could be the case. And then this is also, I guess you could say, a variant for Cassandra because she's in her like rusty getup, like she's all much older and run down sort of thing. Honestly, as a 2-pack, I think it's okay. I'm not dying to get this one, but it is pretty decent. And one of these days in the future, if the price is right, I will be buying it.
I
But
do
this
like the
next
look of
one-
the rusty Cassandra, actually. It's a neat little variant, I think. And also to mention is that with this pack and potentially the Wave 1 version as well, is that Character Options did 2 versions of Cassandra, one with blue eyes and then a revised version with brown eyes because they got it wrong. They just painted her eyes blue first and thought that was the color, and then in later batches they went, actually it's wrong. Let's change it back to brown.
Yeah, that is true. I've seen a couple of blue-eyed Cassandras pop up before. Do any of you guys have that variant or not really?
I do, but I got it in the 2007 New Earth set release with the Doctor and Rose because that was the odd thing with character with that particular paint error is that they managed to somehow do it multiple times despite correcting it on that very first one. So it's very odd in that way, but they yeah, someone managed to mess it up again.
My feeling is that might have been just old factory stock or something lying around for those what are they, Sainsbury's 3-packs. But this next figure is really cool. We have the Cyberman. Now, this is the first version that does not have the gun arm. Jack, do you have this figure?
No, but I did own one. I remember it was. I think I owned like 3 or 4, which is one of the first times I wanted to sort of army build as a kid. Because I remember being, you know what, they petrified me as a child, but I'm some weird sadistic child, so I wanted a figure of the monster that scared me. But I remember yet again, I think this one actually might have filled in for Iron Man as well, because it sort of, reminded me of the Mark II suit.
And in 2013 they fulfilled your wish there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I remember using Sharpies, of all things, to colour in one of them red and sort of a yellowy gold and turning him into a Iron Cyberman.
Oh, that's
Because that-
hilarious.
You should do a custom figure of that like now, but with, like proper paint. That'd actually
That'd
be
be
kind of
interesting.
interesting to look at.
I could do that, I've got a spare rusted Cyberman. That's the only one I've got spare, though. But yeah, I remember playing with them so much they were basically black by the end of their life. All the silver had rubbed off. But I loved them. I thought they were fun. I remember one time I was like playing quite roughly with them, and the head popped off, and I was like devastated, and I was on the verge of tears. And my mum just comes in and pops it back on. I'm like, oh, thanks, cheers.
That's a pretty cool story. Alex, do you have this particular version?
No, I don't actually. I've only ever had versions with the gun arm on them. I've never had one without it, which I have no idea why. I just have never bought this version or come across it. It's just been completely off my radar, really. But obviously they're pretty similar, so I can, get a rough idea of it. And I think the Cyberman sculpt is brilliant. I think out of the entire 2006 line of figures, the Cyberman is the best. It's the best figure that they made. The sculpting is so sharp, and I think it's due to the fact it's one of very few figures in these earlier ranges that was made using digital sculpting, whereas most of them were done traditionally using, sort of I don't know what you'd call it, sort of clay essentially. But this was like one of the very first digital ones that they did, and it really shows because it's very sharp. And I'd say its weak points are probably on the face, like where the sort of face mask piece sort of joins the face, if you know what I mean. Where that sort of gap is, uncertain really, especially those B&M ones like 2009. Like it would make the face sort of stick out a bit too much, and it didn't flow as much as it could have done. I'd say the second weak point, as Jack mentioned before, is the fact the silver paint would rub off if you played with them too much, and they'd sort of, have to show the black plastic underneath. I mean, mine are still okay, but there's still quite a lot of black on them, and it's a little unfortunate.
I do remember one of the, even as a kid, so this whole, I'll get into it in a second, but one of the biggest selling points of it to me as a kid was the articulation, because I remember it being like, leagues above everything else we had gotten up until that point. So that whole notion that companies put out that, oh, kids don't care about articulation as long as it looks like the thing they see on screen, I think is a load of nonsense. Because one of the major selling points of it was because you could move them about in big poses, which is ironic because all the Cybermen did in that story was stomp about with their arms by their side.
Yep.
But yeah, I think you're onto something there, Jack, really, because nowadays you find like toy companies make like action figures with like 5 points of articulation, and it's just utter garbage. But, back in sort of our childhoods, action figures would have a fair amount of movement, and honestly, the more movement it had, the better. And I think with these Cybermen, it's the ball jointed head that really does it. Like,
Yeah, I was
it's
gonna say they
brilliant.
used ball joints and the pins, right, for the Cybermen and how they moved for their
Yeah,
articulation.
Yeah.
yeah, they had ball jointed arms, legs, and a head.
They did a fabulous job with this figure. This is one I think this is the first figure I can actually say I own without the gun arm, and I really do love it. They did a fabulous job with it. Once again, the only problem is that silver paint. You just look at it the wrong way and it just starts to fall off.
Another thing I've just realized as I'm looking at one now, is the legal information is on his backside, which is a bit annoying. It's like, it's because you can see it and it's annoying. Although it does have a nice tread on the feet as a result. So it depends what you want, really.
I remember you could actually, where they gave him ball jointed feet, you could get him in like the proper stance they had in the episode, with their legs slightly, apart.
Yeah.
It was just one of the best, even to this day, one of the best, new Who figures they've done, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just that silver paint. Even back in the day, it seemed like it would flake off, but I didn't even play with mine or anything like that. I got it just a couple of years ago, and it's starting to look black just sitting in my IKEA cabinet, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to buy like 2 more of these soon.
Or do what I did and Sharpie it red and gold. Pretend it's Iron Man.
There's an idea. But the next figure we have isn't just your typical Cyberman. We have the Cyber Controller coming up. Is this a figure any of you guys had?
I did. I own this. It's I remember it was a birthday present. I remember how I got it. I loved it. And yet again, it's going to become like my catchphrase at this point. I could play with it with my Ben 10, my Batman, my Iron Man. I remember for the longest time, the Iron Man, the throne I used for Megatron's throne from Transformers because I thought it blended well and it scaled well. Because I remember the controller where his brain was on show petrified me. Couldn't play with it. It stayed in the drawer basically the whole time.
That's a really cool story. What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I got the Cyber Controller in the throne room set. So I always had it with the throne and the 2 cyber guards, and honestly, it's so cool. But we'll talk about that next episode. But focusing on the figure itself, I love the brain on that head. I think it's just really nicely done, and obviously has the sort of transparent plastic on top of it. It just gives off such a really good effect, and the way sort of the eyes look lit up, it's really nicely done.
Yeah, I agree. And I also had the Cyber Throne set. That's where I got mine. The only thing I'm missing is one Cyberman to guard him. But this is, once again, excellent figure. Really cool showing the brain through the transparent clear plastic. I absolutely love that feature. Love this figure as well, and we'll be talking about him later on as well with the Cyber Throne. But this is an overall pretty solid wave. Looking at Wave 2 for 2006. Next up, we have Wave 3, which came out in September of 2006. What figures do we have in this one, Alex?
So for Wave 3, we have a re-release of the 10th Doctor again, both the trenchcoat version and the suit version. And for new releases, we had quite a few. We had Rose and K9. However, Rose was in a new sculpt this time from her New Earth outfit, and K9 was clean. We've got Captain Jack Harkness with his squareness gun. We've got the Werewolf. We've got the Cyberman with his arm gun, as well as two variants of the Krillitane, one brown and one grey.
Oh, you say brown Krillitane? I say red.
I've always said brown.
I say grey.
It's the other one, Jack. Do you say
Oh,
red,
no.
red or brown?
This is like orangey brown,
Orange.
really.
Yeah, I would say orange.
Yeah.
So, wow, we got 3 different answers going on. This will be fun. So, looking at the Rose and K9 once again, did you have this one, Jack?
I think I did, because I remember owning the Rose. So I must have, because I never bought her as a single pack, so I must have at one point. But yeah, again, she was sort of chucked to the side because K9, the robot dog, one of the best. So loved him as a kid. I did own it, but K9 stole the show again, really, for me.
Now, which K9 do you prefer? Do you prefer the rusty K9 or do you like this clean version here?
I'd probably say rusty K9, more paint detail. Looks cooler.
That's a good answer. Alex, what about you? Did you have this pack?
No, I didn't have this pack. I bought the Rose via another release, and with K9, I've never had the clean version. I've only got the rusty one. But as Jack said, the rusty one is the superior one anyway, so I don't mind. But with the Rose, I think it's a vast improvement on the first one from Series 1. So honestly, it's great the character made it, although the arm articulation is kind of lacking, which is actually kind of unfortunate because if you watch the the little TV advert they had for the range, the prototype had the elbow articulation in it, and it's like, where did that go? Would have been, I mean, aesthetically it wouldn't have been as good, but I think in terms of movement, it would have been better.
I read somewhere that Billie Piper hated how it made her arms look, so she demanded them to be sort of static. That's what I read somewhere. Don't know how true that is.
To be fair, that sounds quite believable.
It sounds believable. She's the reason why we don't have any more Rose figures these days. So,
yeah, she really must have not liked these figures at all.
this is a 2-pack I don't own, but they did re-release this back in 2014 or so, maybe 2015. For some reason with Underground Toys in the United States, and even then, it just did not move me to buy this 2-pack.
Yeah, I swear this set of figures had like the most re-releases of like anything.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think it's a nice 2-pack. It's a nice K9, nice Rose, once again. Just nothing moves me to go out of my way to buy this, even at, I think companies still want like $25 for it or something ridiculous, but like,
Extortion.
if it was cheaper, I would go for it, like maybe 15. But yeah, still nothing moves me to buy this 2-pack. But this next figure is pretty cool. We have Captain Jack Harkness coming up. Jack, speaking of Jack, did you have this figure?
I did own this figure. I loved Jack as a kid. Obviously, he was first introduced in the first series I watched, which was Series 3. It was the first time I ever met that character. And I thought he was awesome. He literally couldn't die. Didn't know why. Had no idea. I just knew the Doctor didn't like him for some reason, but seemed to sort of be his friend. I remember asking my mum if I could have a Jack figure, and she got it for me, but I was so confused as to why he wasn't wearing his trench coat. Because at the time I hadn't seen any of Series 2. So, but I remember really enjoying it. And I will say, controversial opinion, because not many people agree with me, but I would say that head sculpt is the best likeness of John Barrowman out of how many variants we've had now? 3, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Honestly, I don't know which head sculpt is my favorite. I'm probably one of the more basic people saying I like the head sculpt that came from the Gelth wave, I believe. But it's a pretty solid figure. Alex, what about you? Do you have this figure?
Yeah, I do, but I got the re-release of it with the hat, not the one with the squareness gun. Which I don't know if that's better or worse, but I mean, that was actually kind of fun though, but we'll talk about that another time. And in terms of head sculpt, yeah, I'd say facially this one probably looks the most like John Barrowman, but I think overall as a head, I do prefer the Series 3 head with the sort of more iconic sort of Torchwood styled hair rather than the sort of combed over sort of look this one has. And I think with that one, the face is still good enough to make that one my favorite head sculpt, even though maybe facially it's not quite as like correct. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I feel like maybe that Series 3 one would be better if like the paint apps were better. Because I think there's the way this one's painted on the eyes and stuff just really captures Barrowman, I think, in a way that the other ones didn't.
I think the Series 3 one is okay. I think it's better than the prototype head that they showed off for it, because that looks nothing like John Barrowman, and I don't understand why anyone would want to own that as a figure.
Yeah, because I mean, I think John Barrowman was kind of picky with the head sculpts.
Yeah, I'm not. That's what I'll say. I'm not surprised it was rejected because it doesn't look anything like him.
Yeah, it didn't look that good, did it? So, but yeah, I think it's kind of weird because I still think, despite the fact he wore the RAF outfit in Series 1, I feel like they should have done it how the character looks on the packaging, where he's got the RAF outfit underneath the trench coat. It's just a bit odd, I think, that coat is so iconic, and even back then it was probably the more noticeable part of his outfit. So the fact they made him without it is, even back then, was a bit odd.
Maybe it's just too much PVC to use then.
That could have been it.
Could have been. But looking at this figure, I have the same one Alex has, the RAF version with the hat. Although when I bought mine loose, it did come with the squareness gun. So I wonder if he should have that or not.
You got
But
best of both worlds.
I guess so.
It should have come with both in the first place, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have loved him to come with a pair of binoculars.
Oh, you see, that would have been great.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was. But yeah, this is a pretty neat figure. Although, as a standalone figure, I don't really care for it that much, but we'll talk about him in a future episode where he does have a pretty exciting pack-in. But this next figure coming up, we have the werewolf. This is arguably one of the more fan-favorite figures from this era. Jack, do you have this figure?
This is one of the only ones I still own to this day. I think it's packed in a cupboard somewhere for safekeeping. And I remember my nan taking me. I feel like Asda should promote me at this point, sponsor me, because I've mentioned them so many times. But I remember my nan
This
taking
podcast
me.
was sponsored by Asda.
Asda. I remember my nan taking me to Asda and letting me pick any figure I wanted, and I remember heading, straight for the Doctor Who section and seeing the werewolf. And I remember there was a woman who worked there. She was like, stocking the aisle up or something like that. And she was like, had no idea what Doctor Who was. She went, wow, it's a big thing, isn't it? And that big and scary, something like that. And I remember thinking, peasant, you don't even know who this is. As a child, I was a very judgmental, sadistic, pessimistic child. But
Don't we all?
yeah. But I remember, I couldn't even wait to get home to open it, so I opened it, in the car on the way back, and I loved it. It was so awesome. Articulation was great. It was huge. Because it could scale with, your other stuff such as, Batman, Ben 10, Superman. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, this really is kind of the first large-scale figure character options made, one of the tallest in the line. Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I bought this figure. I think I might have got like a Comic Con or a secondhand shop or something really cheap, like only like £2 or something. It's actually not one I've really looked at like as an adult collector that much. I've not really looked at it and appreciated it, but I've got it out for this podcast just to, give it a little look at, and I'm actually really impressed with it. Like as Jack said, the articulation on it is really good. I think I counted earlier. I think it has like 21 points of articulation, which
That's
considering
crazy.
this was 2006, that's incredible, really. And it's great because you sort of have the character either sort of in that sort of stood up position, or you can have him all fours. It just works either way because of the way the neck moves and the feet. I think in some ways I do think it's not perfect in my opinion. I think when you look at the colors compared to like the actual CG model, it's probably could do a bit like being a bit more brown, I think maybe, but apart from that, I think the sculpting detail is just really nice on it. And it's not the kind of figure you'd ever get today. It's just the sheer mass of it, really. It's just huge, and One detail I really like is the sort of paint apps of the veins on it, like the sort of purpley color they've used for the veins on it. I
Yeah,
just
it's kind of crazy looking at it. I don't have this figure. I do need to get him. He's a little more expensive in the US, costing around $30 or so, even loose. But have to say, he is a really nice sculpt. Articulation is insane on this figure. The only thing I don't like is, I don't know why, but it just looks to me it's like more fleshy human colors. I wish he was more gray and bulked up with like fur kind of, but that's just me.
yeah, that's what I was trying to get at earlier, like the sort of slightly more brownish color it should have had, because
He looks
it's
kind of pinky,
but it's a lot more fleshy than like furry.
like a shaved dog. But he still is a really cool figure and easily one of the tallest in the range. Not the tallest, but I think one of the tallest. Next up, we have a Cyberman, but this time this is the one with the gun arm. Now, Jack, do you like the one with the gun arm better or without the gun arm?
Probably without the gun arm, because as a kid, you know, I don't think, there's loads of robot characters, as you know, from sort of that time where their gun would be on the arm, they shoot. But I think there's something really intimidating and scary about the original Cybermen, where they would come up to you and electrocute you, with their hands. So I think even as a kid, even though they petrified me, I sort of understood the appeal of having, the Cybermen without the gun.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. I prefer the one without the gun arm because, like you said, them just walking up behind you and electrocuting you. I hated that thought. Like, that sounded worse than being shot at by a little laser from their arm.
Yeah.
But it would have been cool if they maybe just did a other variant like similar to this, where it could have been like what they released in Series 6 later on with the open hands with the electrocution
Yeah, that would have been
things
cool.
coming out. That would have worked pretty well back in the day for 2006, I think. Alex, what about you? Which one do you prefer?
I don't know. I see the appeal of both. Like, obviously, as someone who only has gun arm ones, I have a bit of a bias and think they're brilliant. And it's really all I've ever really known. I can't even remember when I first knew they even did one without them, because I just, as a kid, they're the only ones I had, so I didn't really register the idea they might have ones without, even though I knew they didn't have them in the Age of Steel and stuff. But for me, I loved the arm gun really, because it meant you could sort of have them like in Doomsday, really, how they sort of have a bit more of a opponent with the Daleks. They sort of have both sides have guns they can use, because if you put the Cybermen without those guns against the Daleks, they definitely lose very, very quickly, because
Yeah. They're just
the
walking up and
Cybermen
trying to
couldn't
hug
walk
them.
up to the
Yeah.
Dalek and electrocute it. That's not going to happen. So for me, in terms of that sort of play, if you wanted to have the Cybermen against the Daleks, this one is definitely the one to have, rather than the one without the gun arm.
I will mention though, kind of like what you just said about them walking up to a Dalek and electrocuting it. They should have shown at least one scene like that where, I don't know, it's outside Cardiff or whatever, and like a bunch of Cybermen are just like encircled around this one lone Dalek after the Genesis arc is open, and them just like getting closer and closer to it, and then like finally like one like touches it, grabs it, and just electrocutes the whole thing and kills it. To at least show that the Cybermen were a worthy enough opponent against the Daleks, because they just looked like they got obliterated in
Well, yeah, but
Doomsday.
they even got roasted. They didn't even, it wasn't even a physical fight they lost. They even
Yeah.
lost, the verbal sparring match. Pest control. But
They
yeah,
got destroyed.
They literally did. They should have just done something to show, like, oh yeah, these guys can fight against them. Next up, we have our first Krillitane. We have, apparently in 3 different colors now, we either have the red, brown, or orange Krillitane with the open mouth. Jack, do you have this figure?
I don't now, but I did as a kid, and I remember really liking it. I remember finding it really annoying that you couldn't get him to stand up properly. Oh my goodness, I'm on a stroke here. Properly. And but I remember the wings were awesome, and I remember playing with it outside with my neighbor. Like hanging baskets that you put flowers in.
Yeah.
I remember my nan having some of them outside her house, I remember making one of them was empty and it turning into like a krillitane nest, and it would kidnap the other figures with grab them in its mouth and then drag it back up there. I remember, I was a simple child that would entertain me for, hours.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool, though. Alex, what about you?
For me, it was actually a very recent purchase. I only got this particular version last year, and it was like in a secondhand shop for about, I want to say £5, maybe a bit less than that. I've had the grey one since I was a lot younger, though, but for this brown one, as I say, very recent purchase. And I definitely like it. It's got quite nice sort of detail, especially the wings. I like sort of that sort of transparent look that they have, to sort of get that sort of flesh, sort of webbed look across. To me personally, I do prefer the grey Krillitane over the sort of orangey brown one, but that's just sort of me personally.
Do you like the gray or the orange one better, Jack?
Orange. I didn't own the grey one as a kid, so I have more of a connection with the orange one.
Oh, okay.
But I do have an interesting fact about this. It makes a cameo in a Black Mirror episode.
Oh yes, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, I remember that.
There's a character who's like a games developer or something, and in his office he has a little Krillitane on the shelf in his office at work.
Oh, that's really cool.
It's in the episode USS Callister, I think. It's like a Star Trek.
Yeah, it is.
parody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
noticed that.
pretty
I had like a Leonardo DiCaprio, just oh, there's a Krillitane there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, pointing at it, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have either of these figures as a kid, but I have to say I loved Krillitanes as an alien and monster. I thought they were pretty scary in School Reunion. Great looking figures, and like you said, with the slightly opaque and transparent wings, man, they did a nice job with those. And the wings were articulated too, right?
Yeah, I was just about to say I could be
Yeah.
imagining it, but I remember them being able to sort of flap the
Yeah,
wings.
you can. Yeah.
They did a nice job with them.
That kind of annoys me with those wings, though, is how easily they come off.
Yeah.
And the fact you see so many second-hand ones as well without the wings, because they've clearly just lost them. That's why it's taken so long to get the red, orange, brown one of it, because every time I've seen it for reasonably cheap prices, it's never had the wings on it. So the minute I found one pretty cheap with the wings on it, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get that.
Yeah, honestly, I think I prefer the red Krillitane more. I think he's a little more visually interesting and kind of more creepy compared to the other one. So that concludes the action figure range throughout 3 different waves in 2006. So, you guys walk into a Woolworths, or if you're Jack, you walk into an Asda, and your mom says you can buy one figure or toy. Which one are you guys buying? Jack, what's one figure you would pick?
Is this kid me or adult me?
Let's do both.
Kid me would probably pick the werewolf again. I was obsessed with that as a kid, so I'd probably pick up the werewolf again. And as an adult, I would probably pick up the regeneration set, because that's one I've never managed to get, second hand in good condition. But yeah, that'd be my picks.
Those are pretty good picks. Alex, what about you?
I think Kid Me would definitely buy the Cyberman, because it's just one you can army build, you can buy it multiple times, and the detail as a kid I was so impressed with. I love the Cybermen. Always do, always will. And I think compared to, let's say, the Daleks as figures, I mean, the proportions on them were never very good until 2008. So for me, the Cybermen were always like the sort of apex of the Doctor Who figure line, really. But as adult me, I would definitely get the regeneration set, because it's the only sort of regeneration sort of set type thing I don't have, because I got the End of Time figures, I got the Time of the Doctor set. It's a bit of a gap for my collection, really. I need it.
Yeah, I got similar answers to both of you guys, actually. Kid Me would have easily picked the Cyberman over any of these figures. It's still one of the best sculpts, best figures and everything. But adult me would actually shoot for the regeneration set. So, you know what, Jack? You might be onto something about them making that 2-pack for collectors.
I do think I'm onto it. I mean, I'm as humble. I try and remain humble, but I do think I'm a super intelligent genius, when it comes to random specific theories. Conspiracy theories.
All 3 of us picked the regeneration set to pick as adults. That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's definitely not a coincidence.
There's no such thing as a coincidence.
Aljon knew what he was doing with that set. He's like, the fanboys are going to pick this one up.
I guess so. So, overall, looking at 2006, we had 17 releases for that year, and they're all fantastic figures. Even though they are a little bit older, they honestly hold up very well, even to this day. We're talking 15 years later. That's crazy. But it's been an absolutely amazing journey to be able to go back in time and look at these figures. I'd like to thank my co-host Alex for joining us and sharing his knowledge on these figures.
Not a problem. It's always good to be here.
And I'd also like to thank Jack for joining us in on this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been very fun, very informative.
Thank you guys for doing this. And last but not least, I'd like to thank you, the audience members, for listening to our podcast. If you enjoyed it, be sure to share it with your friends, and also be sure to like and subscribe. This is only the beginning, and we have big things planned. The goal of this podcast series is to cover the history of all Doctor Who figures and toys, so be sure to stay tuned for more. I'm your host, Wade, and this is the Parliament of the Daleks.